by the leaders of the church. It, it says here in verse 6, they added nothing unto me. Who is they? They is the leaders added nothing to me. Ang sabi dyan, wala na silang dinagdag doon sa sinabi ko. They agreed with everything I said. They said, my gospel, by grace through faith alone, saves. They said, the pillars of the church, James, the brother of Jesus, John, Cephas, or Peter said, that's true, that's complete, carry on. That is the true gospel. 7. The pillars of the church added this. Remember that Paul was commissioned to share the gospel to the Gentiles. Okay? While Peter and the other disciples were commissioned to share the gospel to the Jews, the circumcised. So in verse 7, they only added that it's the same gospel. What you, Paul, are preaching and what us, Peter and company, are preaching are the same gospel, only that we have different audiences. We were commissioned to share it to two different groups. And why is this so? We find in verse 8 that it is because it came from one source. He who worked through Peter also worked through Paul. It is the same God who shared the gospel to all of them. And therefore, obviously, it will be the same gospel. 9. And how did this meeting end? The leaders of the church extended their right hand of fellowship to Barnabas and Paul and said, what you're doing is true, what you're doing is good, carry on. That is a symbol of trust and confidence, extending the right hand of fellowship. Okay? They have only one admonition. Huwag niyo kalimutan yung mga kapatid natin naghihirap. Don't forget or remember to continue to help the poor, which is something that was already in Paul's heart, because in verse 2, remember the revelation from Agabus, one of the reasons why he went up to Jerusalem was to provide relief, right? The famine. Now, presumably, the meeting ended. I think it's clear to all of us that the gospel was preserved. Yan yung naging katapusan ng meeting. Sinabi nila na salvation is by grace through faith alone. Wala tayong idadagdag. Okay? Wala kayong kailangan gawin, maniwala sa Panginoon Diyos. Okay? So that was established. And presumably, Paul goes off to his Gentile audiences. He continues with his apostolic journey. On the other hand, Peter was in Antioch. We see that in verse 11. Now, why Antioch? At the time of writing of this book, which is around 49 AD, Antioch was a place that had the highest concentration of Jews. And because Cephas, or Peter, was commissioned to share the gospel to the Jews, rightfully so, he was there. Diyan pinakamaraming Jews, di ba? Nandiyan si Peter. But ladies, look at this. In verse 11, Paul opposes Peter to his face. What is more is, he says, because he stood condemned. Verse 11 is setting the scene for another confrontation, another dramatic confrontation, if you may. Now, after some time, Paul goes to Antioch, right? He goes there, and there is this dramatic confrontation in verse 12. What happened was, Paul had been fellowshipping with Gentiles, okay? At the same time that he was sharing the gospel to the Jews in Antioch, he was also building his relationship with the Gentiles. And what was he doing? He was eating with them. This eating with them, with the Gentiles, is a regular thing. It was a habitual thing. But what happened was, as soon as the circumcision party came, and the circumcision party, I have to backtrack a bit here. The circumcision party is from the people of James. Remember, James, Peter, and John from the Jerusalem church? The circumcision party here are people from James's group. Okay? So the people in James's group in Jerusalem hear that, naririnig niyo ba? Did you hear? Peter has been fellowshipping with Gentiles. Correct, he was commissioned to share the gospel with Jews, but he was also fellowshipping with Gentiles. Now I have to stop here and tell you a little bit something about Jewish traditions. The circumcision party are people who are strict believers of the Jewish tradition. What does that mean? They believe that in order for a Jew to fellowship with a Gentile, the Gentile has to be circumcised first. I cannot fellowship with you because you are defiled. You are impure. Okay? The belief of the Jews is this. They believe that they are the chosen race. Rightfully so. We see that in the Old Testament. Not only that, they believe that salvation is through them. Rightfully so. Jesus Christ came from the line of Abraham, the Jewish line, right? The error in their interpretation of all these things lies in this. They think that in order for you, the Gentile, to be saved, you need to be circumcised. You need to become a Jew. How will you become a Jew? You need to be circumcised. And that is why I want all of you to see how their mind is working. The circumcision party believes that as in sharing the gospel, remember, salvation by grace through faith plus nothing equals salvation. They believe that only if you are a Jew can you claim that salvation. So if you're not a Jew, in their mind, you need to be a Jew first. Yes, that's all correct. And that was why they were adding circumcision. Okay? Because their belief is you need to become a Jew. Alright? So that is where they're coming from. What is more is this. Peter, in the book of Acts, had this experience with Cornelius. We won't go there because it's a long verse. But let me summarize it for you. Peter had a past experience in the book of Acts whereby he ate and fellowship with a Gentile by the name of Cornelius. And what happened there? He was reprimanded. Sinabihan siya, Peter, bakit kumakain ka kasama ng Gentile? Hindi yan pwede sa atin. Kailangan ma-circumcise muna siya bago kayo mag-fellowship. Before you can eat together, you need to be circumcised because they're defiled, they're impure. The Gentiles are. And so, that was the belief that was going on at this time. Now, we all know that that's the wrong interpretation, right? Because we know that as the church leaders in Jerusalem had already settled, salvation is by grace through faith alone. Okay? So you understand now, I need to add something. Josephus, I mentioned him, right? Josephus is one of the most popular Roman historians. And during the time of the writing of Galatians, this is around 49 AD, Josephus records that there was a huge massacre. There was a huge slaughter, both of Gentiles and Jews. And Josephus writes that it was because of Judaizers. You know, the Judaizers, they were persecuting Jewish people who were fellowshipping with Gentiles. At the same time, they were also persecuting Jews who were fellowshipping with uncircumcised Gentiles. They said that cannot happen. They're very strict in interpreting their Jewish laws. But the Zealots, you've heard of them? The Zealots, you know what they did? They killed people, Jews and Gentiles, who fellowshiped with each other without the Gentile being circumcised. So that is the kind of fear that is gripping Peter in verse 12. Okay? So he was so fearful that he had to withdraw. He had to stop altogether his fellowshipping with the Gentiles. Takot siya sa buhay niya, di ba? Ayaw niya sigurong mamatay. Right? Pero dito nagsermon si Paul. This is where Paul told him off. Okay? In verse 13, we see the very damning influence of Peter's conduct. What happened, ladies? The rest of the Jews acted hypocritically. What does that mean? The Jews knew that they could fellowship with the Gentiles. They knew that they were the same people, saved by grace through faith alone. They knew that even if I'm a Jew, even if you're a Gentile, whether you're uncircumcised or not, I can fellowship with you. We're brothers, we're sisters in the faith. Nobody needs to be circumcised. We can fellowship, right? But when Paul was in Antioch, he observed, but not only Peter was not fellowshipping with the Gentiles, it was the rest of the Jews. They followed their leader, Peter. All of them stopped fellowshipping with the Gentiles. And you know what was so painful to Paul? It's Barnabas. Barnabas and Paul were the best buddies in the faith. Okay? They believed in the same gospel. They walked together in their apostolic journey. They were there when they shared the gospel to the Gentiles. They were together when they suffered, when they rejoiced, when they put up all these churches. They were together. They were best buddies. And after just a short period of time, Paul goes back to Antioch and discovers, Barnabas, pati ikaw ba? Na-influensyahan ni Peter? Ano nangyari? You know, when I was reading this verse, I could feel his heart. Next verse. So Paul corrects Peter in public, and he says, Peter, your conduct, what you're doing, you stop fellowshipping with the Gentiles. What is that? That is not in step with our gospel. That is not in step with our belief. We're the same people. Uncircumcised Gentiles, Jews, we all believe that we are saved by faith. Why did you do that? You know, there was a division now in the church in Antioch because of that. You can imagine, right? A certain behavior infiltrating the church, hindi na pwede. Ano yun? Hindi ba pareho tayong lahat? There was now a division in the church, which is not in step or which is not aligned with our gospel. And so Paul goes on to say, why? What is the gospel? And to all of us today, including myself, I want to understand what the gospel truly is. What is salvation? By grace alone, by faith alone. What does that mean? Okay? Why is there a need for a gospel? In Romans 3, we see everybody has sinned. Ladies, there is no person, there is no one person in this world who is exempt from sinning. Is there anyone here who will tell me that she